All right, hello everyone. We've got a rundown of Premiere Pro. So this is the video editing software that we'll be using in this class or while you're in school and you have access to Adobe stuff. For this particular assignment, there is a zip folder. It will take a minute to download. It's not super huge compared to what video files often are, but it's larger than some of the other stuff that you've downloaded. But once you get that downloaded, you open up Premiere and you'll kind of come to this blank screen. We say new project. So I'm going to, let's see, we're going to just title this Benvenuto Workshop. Doesn't actually matter because what gets handed in is something that's rendered. And but we say our project name, and currently it's set to a different project location than I want, so because this is my other class, so I'm going to click this and say choose location and then navigate to our class. And I'm actually going to put it in this Premiere Assets folder. That's the whole thing I downloaded. I might as well save the whole project to the same location. There's a bunch of other stuff, but actually none of this is really something that's going to concern me. And I say create. And it brings up the program. So we have, this is your timeline. No, that's not a timeline. That is, your timeline's mostly going to go here. I believe mine is not showing because I usually have it on another window. So I'm going to say timeline. Yep. So I have to just drag mine over here. There we go. So this will look more like yours. I have a second monitor, so it's usually off to the side. And I'm also going to drag it because I want more timeline space. But the way this works is that your timeline is over here. Your whole thing, the video of it, is going to be over in the top right. The top left is going to be a lot of things, including looking at individual clips and effects controls. And then the bottom left is going to be the assets that you bring in along with some of the effects that you can add in. So there's a couple of sections here where you do two different things. But we need to bring in some assets. So Premiere needs stuff. You can't just make anything from thin air. We have to import it. So if I bring up my Windows for a second and I go into Premiere Assets, there are 4 different folders. Some audio files, some HD video files, some not HD video files, which are called movies, and some stills. And I'm going to see if I can bring those in to Premiere. Let's see. So if I go import and I navigate to my desktop, there it is. This class, this thing. And let's see if I select this folder. Yep, I can say import folder. And, oh, we're going to undo that. Sometimes, let's see, I'm going to bring in the entire Premiere Assets folder. All right, import entire project, import folder. There we go. So this is what I wanted. I wanted it to bring in each of these things as a folder. I believe it's not doing that for audio. Oh, because there's only one item. So apparently Premiere is deciding for me that if there's only one item in there, it's not going to give me a folder, which means very probably, I've never encountered that particular situation before. Yep. That's why. You can also double click in this blank thing here. So the reason it wasn't listening to me is not because I had to do that special thing. We can just import stuff regularly, but rather it doesn't want to give you a folder for a single item, which is a little bit of a shame because I should make that choice. But once these things are in here, you can twirl these down and you can see all of your stuff. Now this program, more than any other, it's going to matter what that stuff is. And you can see when I twirl these down, we've got all these videos with a frame rate. And even amongst the HD videos, there's 2 different frame rates. This is the length of time that each of these lasts. So this one's 30 seconds, this one's a minute and 12 seconds, this one's only 8 seconds. And then if I scroll over this way, eventually Yes, here's the size. So these are HD at one size. This is HD at a slightly smaller size. And these are SD videos. And of course, your stills can be anything. All right, so you can kind of get some information about what it is that you're bringing in here. But in order to get started in editing any of this together, we have to decide now what the end product is going to be generally. So in other words, is our end product going to be based on one of these HD videos, or is it going to be based on one of these SD videos? And I'm actually going to do two different ones so that we can kind of see what happens. But let's say that this HD video stuff, which I can double click one of these, take a look. So it's footage of a band and playing at an event, and it's in high definition, it's a certain size, and maybe that's the crux of what we're doing. This is going to be like the main thing. So I can right click on this and say new sequence from clip. And what that will do is it will create a sequence that has all the same settings as this clip, including the frame rate and the resolution, which also includes, by the way, the pixel aspect ratio. It includes the audio situation. There's a lot going on. You can see this is actually the sequence. This is the actual clip itself, and they match. And I can come over here and nope, that is nope, also not what I wanted to happen. Oh dear. Can I close? Sometimes this thing just, let's see, timeline, there we go. Bring it back out. Double click to get this back. We definitely don't need my sound bar to be that big. There we go. I need to, there it is. I need to, oh, you're not going to let me. Oh, there we go. I need to rename this. There we go. Because I can tell it's a sequence through this little icon right here. Kind of tells me it's a sequence. But I like to have it named. It's also a different color. So all these HD videos are blue. These SD videos are purple. These stills are pink. This audio is green. So it kind of color codes things so you can figure things out a little bit. But by selecting that HD sequence, anything else that I bring in here is going to match the situation I have. But I might do a different project within, or different sequence within the same project that uses one of these smaller pieces of video. So I might choose, and I'm double clicking on these and it just to kind of see which one is which, because they come up here. And I can choose this curly lightning one and also say new sequence from clip. And it's going to make a sequence, which I can rename SD sequence. And it will be the size of this footage. And you kind of have to just choose what it is you're going to do. So for this workshop, what you're going to be handing in, I recommend sticking with this one. That's kind of going to be the main thing that I'm going to be showing a bunch of editing stuff on, but it is, for the assignment, you can kind of do as you please as long as you show control over this stuff. But I have two different ones here because I just want to show the different things that happen. Now, the way this timeline works, I'm going to make this timeline bigger so we can take a look. There are different tracks. So this is not layers. So everything we've dealt with so far pretty much is layers, and there's like a thing on top of another thing on top of another thing. Here we have tracks. So I can actually, I have this thing right here, and then I can grab this other band clip and drag it in here, and you can see all of these band clips can be in the same track. And I can reorder them pretty easily. I can just kind of drag them around, and I can say I want this one to be... As you drag, by the way, you're going to hear the sound. I have it only coming through my microphone, so that should be muted, but I'm also going to mute it in a moment. These actually kind of snap together. You can turn that off, and we will in a minute, but you can kind of put things in sequence pretty easily. I can drag select multiple clips. So these individual pieces that have been dropped in here, these individual videos, They're literally different video files. Those are clips when we are in here. And we put all of them together. I currently have them all on one track for video. There are 2 tracks for audio because there was 2 different microphones attached to the camera. That can be left and right. That can be all manner of things. But they are all part of this sequence. All right, so that's kind of the terminology of what's happening here. I can also, if I want to, I can take this right here and I can drag it up, and I can take the audio and drag it down to, and this would allow me to have transitions and overlap, because that is something that we will do sometimes, is have overlap between things. So if you want to do a fade in and fade out, you don't put things on the same track necessarily. You put, you know, this on track 1 and this clip on track 2, and then you'll overlap them later. All right. Let's see. All right, so this is what happens when we have a whole bunch of, I'm just going to mute these right now. So what is, where's my mute button? Mute, there we go. Just muting all of them so I can drag through. But when you have all the clips that are the same size, they just piece together like that. If there is a piece of footage that, a part of this footage that you don't want, for example, maybe we don't need all of this that's going on, you hover over the edge right here and you see that, you can just pull it in. So as soon as you hover your mouse over a particular location, there we go. So we can kind of just trim that automatically. Another way that you can trim things, not necessarily when it's the end of it, but sometimes you have to trim something out of the middle, there is a razor tool right here. And if I select that, it lets me click. If I go back to my selection tool, it's now 2 separate pieces. Now in this case, again, it's not necessary. I could have just trimmed the edge, but sometimes we need to chop stuff up into different pieces. All right, so these are all the same size, but what happens if I bring something smaller into here? I bring something smaller into here, it takes up a fraction of the space. So different things that you bring into whatever video you are editing will end up as different sizes. If I bring in a still, Pi Day, there's Pi Day. It usually, I believe, it tries to fit it in one direction, which we'll see too in a second. But it kind of tries its best to bring them in. Most photos, though, will be squarer than your video footage. Most of our footage today is going to be fairly horizontal, landscapey, and kind of much longer than it is tall. Your standard television is 1.85 across, 2.1 up and down. Photos are squarer than that, usually. And then this is older video, so it's much smaller. So how do we handle that? Well, if you go into, if you double click one of these when they're in the timeline, you get that clip up in here. And there's some editing that we can do, including with effects controls. So I have here the waltz, which is the name of that clip, and it's in band sequence, you know, waltz. So it's in this sequence. If you do it from here, it's not going to come up like that. And I can set its scale to something larger. I just actually click and drag, middlemost drag. Interesting. Usually we can scrub this number. Oh, now it's deciding to go. Cool. We can scrub that up into whatever size we want. Now, rules with pixels still apply. I've just blown this up to 220 to 1.25 times more than it was originally. It's going to be fuzzier, right? This will be pretty crisp as long as the person who shot it did what they're supposed to. This will be fuzzy. And so one thing we have to do whenever we are editing something together is kind of plan. We have to figure out, okay, how big can we make something, and make sure we're shooting in a similar fashion. It's also why when people do documentaries and they're bringing together different disparate video things, we've had to come up with some solutions to that. So how do we deal with the fact that these are different shapes and sizes? Well, if I go to Pi Day over here and I double click that and I go to effects controls, oh, that just happens to be that size? What? I'm not even sure I believe that. I do happen to know that this is a pretty good size file. I can actually see what it is over here. It is, yeah, 1650 by 1275, which makes it bigger than the actual video. So I can make it a little bit bigger, and it might be a little bit cropped. But in this case, it actually kind of looks okay. So a lot of times with any photography that we're bringing in, I believe this one, oh, here, got a cat picture. So she, Queen, is, her picture's much bigger all around than the, man alive. I guess I'll just have to use this. It's much larger than the video I have. So again, I can kind of crop it. I can also use these here. Oh my. I really do not want to have to stand by. All right, trying to work out how to scrub through these things because nobody likes to just, you know, change it like this. But holding down Shift eventually seems to get it to, you know, click. I actually wonder if... Nope, that is not at all what was going on. Undo. But yeah, you're supposed to be able to click on, you can see that little arrow right there. You're supposed to be able to just click and drag, which is the most intuitive way to change these things, because I would never know that 960 pixels, like up or down, is what I would want for this. But you can see I can reframe it. So sometimes we make things the same size and we reframe them. Other times we can't really reasonably do that. So there are some tricks. If you're really going to get into video, there are some tricks that you can do with, for example, putting another version of this in the background so if we look through the effects here, there's blurs, so you can make a background version of this that's bigger and very blurred. You can also, there's certain color correction things, so you can bring down the contrast and bring, with the color balance, you can bring down the saturation. That's a very common video footage thing where instead of black bars, you kind of have a dupe of the video, but it's blurrier and less saturated, so it's less noticeable, but it moves the same way as your video. So those are a few different things you can try to do that. Obviously, if something is smaller, so here's my SD sequence. If I go, where's my media browser? Nope, libraries. Oh, for heaven's sake. Project, there we go. If I come in here and I try to bring the band sequence in here, you can also see some of these clips do not have audio. So that's what this means. There's no audio on that clip. It's obviously quite enormous. So I would double click this and we would bring down the amount. I'm just going to scroll this. There we go. Might also be able to, nope, we can't really click and drag this. So that's why it's unfortunate that the scrubbing isn't working here. You can't just intuitively click and drag things in here. The position is set by this. There are ways to have these animated as moving, but that's not really what we're going to do for that, right? So we've brought it down so that there's you know, a certain amount of visible. I don't have any black bars on the top or bottom, and then I'll kind of click through it and figure out, you know, what's a good sort of cropped version of this, right? Old movies that used to be on old televisions had that pan and scan. This basically is that same thing. All right, but you choose your sequence size based on what the bulk of what you're doing is going to be. So if I have, I can pull these things off to the side for a second. If the bulk of what you're going to be working on is the, this band footage, then that is what the basis for the sequence would be, and then everything else would be separate from that. And you just adjust it to match this. All right, so now we have to talk about transitions, because we can't really edit video together without transitions. So I just hit the space bar or this button right here to play. And we can kind of watch and get a sense of how things are going. And editing video is kind of a matter of getting an idea of how the order you want things and then fine-tuning from there. So if I'm watching this footage, oh, okay, so we're not going to have that. And this one also had a bit of like trim at the end, although that's like when they stop playing. So I think I'm going to kind of put this over here. And I'm going to move this whole thing back this way. And I'm going to go to this, and I don't mind this part, but I don't need the floor. So we're kind of trim that up a little bit. I can use this to zoom in. The closer we are to what we're doing, the tighter our edits can be. And what I now want to do is I want to kind of build in a transition. So it goes from here, and it goes into, I think I want it to go into the other one. Oh, no, that's not what I want. I have to zoom back out again if I want to move this. There we go. So I turn off snapping, which is this button right here, and I zoom in a little bit. I move my time marker, by the way, to where I want to zoom into, because that's where it'll zoom into. And I make sure these are overlapping. So I watch stuff, and it's going to kind of overlap into this. I'm going to trim this up a little bit because I want it to be moving when it transitions. And no, I'm redeciding. I had a game plan and I'm blowing the whole thing up because I don't like that transition. So that's what you kind of call a jump cut, because it's going from this to this, which is the same thing. And so I can maybe choose like something else here. I can actually, we'll just keep the jump cut. But if I overlap them like this, so I go from here to here, I select the edge. So this is kind of the bread and butter of getting your transitions in, is that you have to have some kind of overlap, and then you click the edge of the thing on top, of the video on top. And you come over to here and you say effects. And I'm going to twirl up all these ones that we're not using. And these are under video transitions. So video effects are where you find color correction things and blurs and sharpens and all that stuff. But video transitions are where you find all these dissolves and page peels and things like that. So I'm just going to use a regular old cross dissolve. And I'm going to just click this and I just drag it right over there. And it defaults to a very, very long cross dissolve, which predates the new footage even showing up. You can actually kind of see it right in there. I double click this cross dissolve, and I definitely do not want it to be a second and 6 frames. I want it to be, let's go with 10 frames. So the way these codes, these time codes work out is hours, minutes, seconds, frames. And a lot of cross dissolves may only be a few frames long. Here we go. And I can hit spacebar again and just watch. Making a little montage, right? And the nice thing about it is if I change my mind and I want it to be a different piece of footage, I can grab it and bring that in here instead. And I can watch how that transition works. And maybe decide I like it going from kind of fast to slow. Let's see. But yeah, we can have a regular cross dissolve. You can put in something fun if you would like. There's page peel. If you've ever seen someone's cheesy wedding video, there you go. So while you're working on your own little video, do whatever you want. You know, put together things in whatever order you would like, but have fun with a few transitions. You know, use a few of these dissolves and things like that. The key is that you have to get one of the, you just pull these up and make sure it's on a track above the next thing, because the thing on top gives way to the thing underneath. Another thing we can do is maybe I want to keep this sound going, but have a break in the video. So what we can do is I'm going to right click or control click on the Mac, and I am going to say unlink. Now be careful, because now your sound is no longer synced to your video, and that is a major problem. So I kind of drag through and I'm like, how long do I want to be on this guy? Probably not that long. And so I can grab my razor blade tool and I can chop out like a chunk of this video footage. And then delete that part. And then if you want to be very careful, you can actually always reselect those and tell them to link up. I can tell these ones to link. Yeah, but I can't tell this other one to link, which is unfortunate. But I can grab, you know, I can go to my project again, and I can grab other footage to bring in here. I'm going to unlink these so I can get rid of that audio. I don't want that audio from this clip. This is just like, you know, like party, you know, stuff like this. And there we go. And I can bring in whatever of this stuff that I want and kind of put them in there. I can cut between things. I can put cross dissolves between things. You can see that this is no longer bigger, because that piece is something I put all the way over here. The one that I changed is a different clip, technically. So I have to double click this again, go to effects controls. If I want this, I think it was 225, made it the right size. If I want that to be like that. All right, but I can grab this pre-ceremony thing. I can turn off snapping, kind of make sure these are overlapped a little bit, and I can go back to my effects and I can place a cross dissolve on one end. Again, I have to tell it to be 10 or 15 frames. And I can do, oh, here we go, an iris round. So this is a very Star Warsy thing. So I'm gonna say 0. Maybe I'll make this one 12. And you can see it actually, I need to bring this one in further. I think if snapping's turned on, it will go to the, yep, it'll tie this to the edge of that. But now if I watch this, silliness. So yeah, this is where you find all of your cross dissolves and can start putting them in. I would stick with things like cross dissolve, film dissolve, dip to black and white. Unless you're working on something that's meant to be a bit cheeky or cheesy. I'm thinking of Star Wars movies. There's a lot of 70s movies that had like white cuts and things like that. So those are all in here as well. I'm going to show you a couple of audio things in here in a second, but, you know, put together just something quick and silly. Just show me that you know how the cuts are working and that you can get audio and video and stills into here, and that you can, you know, get them kind of put all together. Let me see here. I have... Where's all my stills? There we go. You can also, yeah, there we go. There are ways to get these to move. The sort of Ken Burns style. So if I set this, nope. There we go. If I set this to, you know, be this size, I'm gonna have it overlap because, again, we want some transitions in here. You can extend stills, by the way. You can make them move for much longer than that. But I can key the position or the scale. So I can go to, come on. Sorry, I'm trying to get it to snap to the edge of this. This button right here, click it once. There's a key on the scale at this point. Go to the end. Change the scale. It should auto key and place another key there, so now it, oh, it didn't. Oh, that's my bad. That's my bad. Oh, no, it's not. Okay, hang on. It did auto key. However, it needs to render, so it kind of doesn't know. You can see it kind of gets bigger real fast. Sometimes when you put too much in here, it can't, like, preview it, so you have to go to Sequence, Render Effects in and out, and it kind of does its thing. And I hope. Yeah, you can see it slowly getting bigger. Little PBS action there. But yeah, it keys automatically once you turn keying on with the stopwatch, and then whatever change you make in the middle, if you make the whole thing like really tiny, it's going to do it. But you won't see it happening in here live until you tell it to render effects in and out. I don't know why you would do that. But you can. Audio transitions. So I'm going to make this timeline bigger so we can see what's happening. You can actually go between any of your tracks and make things bigger so you can see the waveform. This zooms you in laterally, but sometimes you want to kind of see some verticality here with the waveform. This line right here is how loud something is. So -999 is, you know, can't hear it at all. 0 means you're not changing. It doesn't mean that the whole thing is 0 decibels. It means that you're not changing it from the original. In order to do any sort of like audio cross, well, there are some audio cross dissolves. So I can go into effects and I can say audio transitions, crossfade. Constant power is probably the one I use a lot. And I drag this over here. And I remember that I did 10 frames. So I match it. And then I gotta drag another one over here. And that should... I'm gonna unmute this so I can hear if it does that. Yep. So that's what you... It's a terrible place in the audio to transition. And in fact, I can, once it's in there, I can actually grab this and kind of move it out a little bit. There's nothing that says your audio can't start transitioning before or after the video does. So if I need it to start kind of getting quieter earlier on, I can do that. But you can see there's very much fewer audio transitions. It's basically going from loud to soft. And then the question is sort of how quickly. That's what these are. Is just a slightly different. You can see that there. Yeah, that's the constant power one. If I put the exponential fade over it and then select it, see, it's a very different look. So it's just a slightly different way. You'll notice it on your own better than you will if you listen to it on my recording of this thing. I believe that's it. So the last thing, once you, again, we're just kind of learning how to get some stuff in here and mess around with it a little and get some stuff out. Once you are done, first of all, you should have saved your project a lot more often than I did, which was, I first did it now. Shame on me. We say, where's the best way to do this? File, export, and then send to Adobe Media Encoder. So this is a slightly complex looking thing. It's its own software, but if you use Premiere or After Effects or Animate, you will end up using Media Encoder. Media Encoder is a way to kind of transition something from one place to another or to render something out. And the active rendering is kind of so complex that it needs its own software compared to the software that does all the editing. But there are settings in here, some of which are pretty obvious for you, right? So where it says output file, you click this and you make sure you put it not where this is going. Where's my desktop? Premiere Assets. There we go. So I'm going to call this, I'm going to put my last name on it to help my teacher. The MP4 thing is chosen by the computer itself. But you can change where it is by clicking there. And you can change what your codec and your container, how you render it, through this. So this is very complicated, and I do apologize. There are presets right here, actually. So for those of you who are never going to do any video stuff again, click this little arrow and make sure you go to H.264. H.264 is a very standard render that makes things better enough. It's nicely compressed, but still looks good. For those of you who are really into this kind of thing and are really going to need to use this, I can make a second video that goes into what all this is. But once you're done, so you select H.264 and you put where you're going to bring it, you say Start Queue. And it's going to take a couple minutes, maybe, depending on how fast your computer is and where it's pulling from. It does, excuse me. There we go. That wasn't too bad. The more transitions, the more animation you have, the longer it will take to render. And if we go here and we can see it is 163 megabytes. So this is by far, don't make your project too long. This is by far the largest file you will make for me in this class. And it may take a minute to upload. If you are unable to get it to upload, the next time we have, just save it. Make sure you have it with you and on your OneDrive or whatever. And you can either use the link to something from OneDrive approach, or you can show it to me. We can get it up there. So give it a shot to get it onto Blackboard. But if it's taking too long or something like that, we can get that worked out. Also, these videos, this is like the images in InDesign when you had to eventually tell them to embed, except you can never tell these to embed. All of these videos, all of these things that are in here, all of these clips, do not exist in this project file. They only exist in these folders. They're all separate files. So you have to keep everything. Now, thankfully, these particular files you can always get back because they're all on Blackboard, and so you can always restore them. It's very simple. Relinking these. Once you relink one, they all relink. But you do need to make sure you hold on to both things on your OneDrive. All right, but just kind of have fun. Do sort of whatever you want, as long as it's not complete chaos, marginally organized chaos. Don't make it longer than a minute. We don't want, in fact, I'm going to get rid of all of that. And I'm going to make sure this doesn't go, you know, longer than a minute. That will help render time. That will help, or sorry, well, it is rendering, but that helps with render time. It helps with export time, and it will help with the size. And by the way, you can see this here. It's kind of following in the same settings. And look how much faster that's going because it's not rendering a whole bunch of useless nonsense blank frames that were going on. And if I check it on my other file here. Oh, it went somewhere dumb. Videos. Yep. Oh dear. I don't know why it keeps going there. Actually, no, I do. I have a project that's going there and it wants the default. Oh, look at that. I dropped 60 megabytes off that just by not rendering past a minute. All right, so stick with about a minute, have some fun, see what you can come up with, and we'll go from there.